In the heart of a quiet little town, tucked between rolling hills and winding roads, stood a modest schoolhouse with wide windows that let the sunlight pour into its classrooms. Inside, at the front of one of those classrooms, was Emily Carter, a teacher whose gentle voice and steady patience had earned her the admiration of students and colleagues alike. Emily had taught at the school for nearly a decade. Every morning, she arrived early, unlocking the classroom while the hallways were still hushed and still. She decorated her chalkboard with neat cursive, organized the desks with care, and left little motivational notes for her students to discover on their desks. Her lessons were thorough, her patience endless. To the children, she was more than a teacher, she was a safe place. A figure of kindness and calm in a world that often felt unpredictable. Her colleagues admired her too. She never raised her voice, even when chaos threatened to unravel a classroom full of restless energy. She stayed behind after hours, tutoring children who struggled. And she remembered the names of siblings, parents, even grandparents, treating every child's family as part of her own circle. Emily's classroom was a place of warmth, stability, and quiet encouragement. Yet despite her openness as a teacher, Emily lived with a shroud of mystery. While she laughed easily in the staff lounge and offered advice freely to newer teachers, she never shared much about her own life. She politely deflected questions about her weekends, her family, or whether she was dating. When conversations drifted toward personal matters, she smiled softly, nodding as others spoke, but rarely contributing details of her own. It wasn't that she was cold or secretive, was as though she carried a story too delicate to expose. There was, however, one detail nobody could miss: the silver ring she always wore on her finger. It was simple, unadorned, and worn down in places from years of use. It was not flashy like an engagement ring, nor ornate like a family heirloom, but it carried an undeniable weight. She never removed it, not when teaching, not when writing on the chalkboard, not even during after-school activities. Some assumed it was a gift from a relative. Others thought perhaps she had once been married, but the truth was never confirmed. Students sometimes asked about it in the innocent way only children can. "Miss Carter, are you married?" one might ask, eyes wide with curiosity. Emily would smile softly, glance at the ring, and simply reply, "Not exactly." And then, with a gentle shift, she would steer the conversation back to math problems or reading assignments. The truth was, behind that silver band lay a story of love, loss, and unspoken grief. But to the world around her, Emily was simply the dedicated teacher, the one who showed up every day with a smile, the one who poured her heart into shaping young minds, the one who carried an air of quiet resilience that few could explain. Her life appeared ordinary, even predictable. Yet within that quiet existence lay a silent heartbeat of memories she had locked away. And it was only a matter of time before someone would notice the ring not as an accessory, but as a key to her hidden past. It was an ordinary Wednesday morning when Emily's routine shifted ever so slightly. The principal had announced earlier in the week that a guest speaker would be visiting a soldier returning from deployment, invited to share with the students about service, sacrifice, and what it meant to wear the uniform. The children had buzzed with excitement, curious about the guest who, to them, seemed larger than life. Emily prepared her classroom as usual, arranging chairs in a semicircle and writing a welcoming message across the chalkboard, honoring those who serve. The air was filled with anticipation. Her students fidgeted in their seats, whispering to one another, their pencils tapping restlessly against desks. Emily smiled, urging them to be patient. The door opened, and in stepped Captain Ryan Matthews, a man in his early 30s, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a crisp uniform that seemed to command respect without a single word spoken. His presence quieted the room instantly. The children's chatter dissolved into wide-eyed stares, their curiosity blooming into admiration. Emily greeted him warmly, extending her hand. "Captain Matthews, thank you for coming. We're honored to have you here." Ryan nodded, his grip firm yet respectful. "Thank you for inviting me. It's good to be here." His voice carried the steady confidence of someone accustomed to both authority and humility. He began his talk with ease, sharing stories about teamwork, discipline, and courage. He spoke about the bonds soldiers formed, about protecting one another, and about the pride of serving something greater than oneself. The children listened with rapt attention, their young faces reflecting awe as he painted pictures of distant lands and difficult missions. Emily stood off to the side, watching both her students and the soldier, admiring the calm, engaging way he spoke. And then it happened. As Ryan gestured during one of his stories, his eyes flicked across the classroom and landed on Emily, more specifically, on her hand. That silver ring. For a fraction of a second, he faltered. His words caught in his throat, his gaze lingering, frozen on the familiar band that gleamed under the classroom's fluorescent lights. A muscle in his jaw tightened. And though he recovered quickly, continuing his story with practiced composure, Emily noticed the slight change. His tone carried a faint edge of distraction, his sentences just a little too measured, as if his thoughts were pulled elsewhere. Emily, ever perceptive, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She assumed it was fatigue, or perhaps the pressure of speaking to a room full of children. But Ryan's eyes returned again and again to that ring, each glance betraying something: recognition, confusion, even disbelief. The students, oblivious to the silent tension weaving itself between teacher and guest, erupted into questions when he invited them to speak. Hands shot up. "Did you ever drive a tank?" one asked. "Were you scared?" asked another. Ryan smiled, answering each question patiently, but beneath his steady exterior, his mind was racing. When the session ended, applause filled the room, little hands clapping eagerly for their heroic guest. Ryan thanked them, shook hands, and posed for a group photo. Emily stood beside him, smiling politely for the camera. But as the students filed out for recess, leaving the classroom quieter, Ryan's demeanor shifted. He lingered, his eyes settling once more on Emily's hand as she gathered papers from her desk. His voice, softer now, carried a note of urgency. "Miss Carter, that ring you're wearing," he said slowly. "Where did you get it?" Emily froze, her heart stuttering in her chest. Her fingers instinctively curled around the silver band, shielding it as though it were something fragile. The warmth drained from her cheeks, replaced by a pale stillness. The classroom, moments ago filled with childish laughter, suddenly felt unbearably heavy with silence. She looked up at him, her eyes wide, words struggling to form. For the first time in years, someone had noticed, not just noticed, but recognized. And in that instant, Emily realized her carefully guarded past was no longer hers alone. The question hung in the air like a weight, heavy and unshakable. Emily's fingers instinctively curled tighter around the silver ring, the way a child might protect a fragile keepsake. Her breath quickened, her mind scrambling for words that would neither reveal too much nor betray the storm of emotion crashing inside her chest. She forced a gentle smile, her voice trembling slightly. "It's just a ring," she said softly, almost dismissively. "Something that's important to me." But Ryan's eyes didn't waver. They were sharp, intent, and filled with a recognition that could not be disguised. He took a slow step closer, lowering his voice so that only she could hear. "No," he whispered, his gaze locked on the band of silver. "That's not just any ring." Emily's stomach nodded. For years, she had lived quietly with that ring, believing its meaning was hers alone. People had asked before, students, colleagues, even neighbors, but their questions were shallow, casual curiosities. She could easily deflect. This was different. The way Ryan looked at it, the way his voice cracked with memory, he knew. Her lips parted, but no words came. Ryan swallowed hard, his composure fraying. "That ring," he said, his voice low and steady, "belonged to Michael Hayes, didn't it?" Emily's entire body went cold. The sound of his name, Michael, hit her like a wave, dragging her backward into memories she had fought for years to keep buried. Her hand trembled against the desk, gripping the edge for balance. You knew him?" she asked finally, her voice barely more than a whisper. Ryan's eyes softened with something between sorrow and reverence. He nodded. "Knew him. He was my brother in arms. We served together overseas. He saved my life more than once." He paused, his voice thickening with emotion. "He used to talk about you, Emily. Every chance he got. He showed us your picture, and that ring. Said it was his anchor. Said it reminded him what he was fighting for." Tears blurred Emily's vision, and she turned slightly, trying to hide the emotions flooding her face. Her fingers twisted the ring unconsciously, as if touching it could bring Michael back. He gave this to me the night before he shipped out," she whispered. "He said it was a promise, that he'd come home, and we'd start a life together." Her voice cracked on the last words, the years of unspoken grief pressing against the fragile dam she had built around her heart. For so long, she had hidden behind her quiet routines and her teaching, pouring her love into her students because she could not pour it into the life she had lost. And now here stood a soldier who had known Michael not as a memory, but as a living man, laughing, fighting, carrying hope in the middle of war. Ryan's own eyes glistened, though he fought to keep his composure. He never stopped talking. "About you," he said. Even in the darkest moments, he'd touch that ring and say, "She's waiting for me. That's all I need to keep going." The classroom felt suffocatingly still. Emily pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, a sob, threatening to escape. For years she had carried the weight of silence, believing her grief was a burden no one else could share. But now it was laid bare, mirrored in the eyes of a soldier who had fought alongside the man she loved. At last, she allowed herself to whisper the truth. "I never stopped waiting," she said, her tears finally spilling. "Not really. Ryan lowered his head, his voice gentle. I think, in a way, he's still here. Through you. Through that ring. Through the love he never let go of. Emily's heart ached, but for the first time in years, the ache felt less like a wound and more like a bond shared, understood, no longer hers to bear alone. And in that moment, she realized the ring was not just a reminder of what she had lost. It was a thread that still connected her to Michael, to the love they had shared, and now, through Ryan, to the truth of his final days. As Ryan's words settled over her like a tide, Emily's mind drifted to the past, the years she rarely allowed herself to revisit. The classroom faded, replaced by the glow of summer evenings and the sound of laughter carried on warm winds. Michael Hayes. She had met him in her final year of college, when the world felt wide and promising. He wasn't in uniform then, just a young man with an easy smile and eyes that seemed to hold equal parts mischief and sincerity. They met at a town fundraiser, both volunteering at a booth for children's activities. He had teased her about her perfectly neat handwriting, and she had laughed at his clumsy attempts to paint faces. It was a simple beginning, but one that bloomed quickly into something deeper. Their relationship grew with the seasons. They spent evenings walking by the river, mornings sharing coffee in quiet cafes, and weekends driving out to the countryside with no destination in mind. Michael had a way of making her laugh even when she was tired from long days of student teaching. He listened intently when she spoke about her dreams of shaping young minds, and she admired his quiet strength, his deep sense of duty, but always, there was a shadow at the edge of their happiness. Michael was already committed to military service. He spoke of it with pride, but also with a kind of resignation. I have to go, Em, he had told her once, sitting under a canopy of stars. It's who I am, but I promise you I'll come back. The night before his deployment was etched into her memory with painful clarity. They had met at her small apartment, candles flickering against the walls, as if the room itself were trying to hold on to every detail of them together. Michael had held her hands, his calloused fingers tracing her skin with a tenderness that belied his rugged exterior. I don't have much to give you right now, he said, pulling a small silver ring from his pocket. It wasn't elaborate, just a simple band, but when he slipped it onto her finger, it felt heavier than gold. This is my promise, he whispered. No matter how far I go, no matter how long, I'm gonna know that I'll come back to you. Wear this, and you'll know I'm with you, always. She had cried softly, clinging to him, the ring cool against her skin but burning with meaning. They spent the night holding each other, speaking of plans for a future they both believed was inevitable, a home filled with laughter, children running through grassy yards, a life built together. But the letter had come months later, the one with military insignia at the top and words that shattered her heart. Michael had been killed in combat, a casualty in a battle far from home. The details were clinical, stripped of the warmth and soul of the man she had loved. Emily remembered crumpling on the floor, clutching the ring as if it could anchor her to him. She wore it every day since, never once slipping it off. It was all she had left, the promise, the memory, the life they had never lived. In the years that followed, she built walls around her grief. She became a teacher, pouring her love into her students, filling the void with lesson plans and laughter in the classroom. To the world, she was simply Miss Carter, patient, kind, unwavering. But behind her calm smile lived the ghost of a future that never came. Now, standing before Ryan, Emily realized she had never told anyone the full story. No one knew about the nights she fell asleep holding the ring, whispering Michael's name like a prayer. No one knew about the moments she nearly took it off, only to feel her chest seize with guilt and loss. Her voice trembled as she confessed. Michael was everything to me. We were supposed to be married when he came back. This ring, it's the only piece of him I still have. Ryan listened with quiet reverence, his expression carrying the weight of shared sorrow. I knew he loved you, he said softly, but I didn't realize how deeply until now. He talked about you like you were the reason he could get through anything. Emily's tears fell freely then, her secret finally spoken aloud. For the first time in years, she wasn't holding the burden alone. Her love, her grief, her promise, it was no longer just hers to carry. And in the warmth of that truth, she felt the faint stirrings of something she hadn't known in a long time. Not happiness, not yet, but perhaps healing. The classroom was hushed now, empty of students, filled only with the quiet hum of fluorescent lights. Emily sat at her desk, her hands trembling slightly as they traced the edge of the silver ring. Across from her, Captain Ryan Matthews remained standing, as if rooted in place by the memories that surged forward with every glance at that small band of metal. He drew a slow breath, his voice low but steady. Emily, I don't know if you've ever been told what he was like out there. Not the Michael you knew in college, the one who walked into firefights, who led men when everything seemed impossible. But I think you deserve to know. You deserve to hear how much of him still lives in the people he left behind. Emily lifted her eyes, red from tears, bracing herself. Ryan's gaze softened as he continued. Michael was our rock. When morale was low, he lifted us. When we were afraid, he reminded us of what we were fighting for. And always, always, he spoke of you. He carried a picture of you, folded in his chest pocket. Some of the guys teased him for it, but he'd just grin and say, laugh all you want. This is my reason for getting home in one piece. Emily's breath caught, a sob escaping her lips. The image of Michael carrying her photo against his heart was almost too much to bear. Ryan's own eyes glistened as he pressed on. In the middle of the desert, when the nights were long and the silence heavy, he'd touch that ring. Not even the photos, sometimes just the thought of the promise he made you. He told me once, when we were crouched in a trench under heavy fire, if I stop here, she'll never know how much I love her. So I have to keep going. Emily pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. She had known Michael's love was strong. But hearing these words made it feel alive again, present in the room between her and Ryan. He talked about building a house with you, Ryan said, his voice thickening with emotion. White porch, big backyard, a dog running around. He wanted a family, Emily. He wanted to live for something beyond the battlefield. He clung to that dream like a lifeline. And when the worst came, he wasn't thinking about fear. He was thinking about you. I was there. I saw the way he reached for his pocket, where your picture was. That's how I know his last thought wasn't war. It was you. Emily's tears fell freely now, spilling onto her desk, her shoulders shaking with the release of years of silence. She had imagined his final moments so many times, cold, lonely, filled with pain. But Ryan's words painted a different picture. Michael's final breath filled not with despair, but with love. Ryan stepped closer, his voice tender but firm. "I survived because of him. I owe my life to Michael. And I need you to know. His love for you wasn't just a memory. It was the thing that carried him, carried us, through hell and back. That ring on your hand isn't just a symbol of loss. It's a reminder of the kind of love most people never get to experience." Emily looked up at him through blurred eyes, her heart aching but also warming in ways she hadn't felt in years. For so long, she had believed her love story ended in silence and grief. Now she understood it had lived on in the desert winds, in the laughter of soldiers around a campfire, in the very heartbeat of the man standing before her. For the first time, she spoke the truth she had never dared to say aloud. "I thought his story ended when that letter came, but hearing you, it feels like I have a piece of him back. A part I never knew." Ryan nodded, his jaw tight with emotion. Then, "Maybe that's why I found you. So you'd know the promise he made wasn't broken. He never let go of it, not once." Emily touched the ring gently, as though holding Michael's hand through time. And in that moment, she felt not only grief, but gratitude. Gratitude for the love she had, and for the soldier who had carried it across oceans and battlefields to bring it back to her now. The days that followed, Ryan's revelation lingered in Emily's heart like a melody she could not stop hearing. Every word he had spoken replayed in her mind: Michael carrying her photo, whispering about their dream house, touching the ring when he needed strength. For years, she had feared his final moments were filled with pain and despair. But now she knew they had been filled with her. That knowledge began to soften something inside her. Like spring thawing a long winter, Emily started to notice small changes in herself. Where once her classroom felt like an escape from her grief, now it became a place where she poured her heart not only into teaching, but also into living. She laughed more openly with her students, listened to their stories with an attention that reflected her new understanding of how precious each connection was, and she stopped hiding the ring before. She had worn it quietly, her hand always close to her side, afraid someone would ask. Now, she allowed it to gleam openly under the classroom lights. When a curious student asked, "Miss Carter, is that your wedding ring?" she smiled softly and said, "It's a promise ring. A reminder of someone very brave who once loved me deeply." The children, too young to understand fully, nodded with wide eyes, their innocence wrapping her answer in warmth. For Emily, it was the first time she spoke of Michael without her voice breaking. Ryan, meanwhile, remained a gentle but steady presence. He visited the school a few more times, not just to speak about service but to sit in on Emily's class, watching her guide her students with patience and compassion. Their conversations after school became longer, sometimes about Michael, sometimes about the war, but often about life, healing, and hope. He never pressed her to move on. Instead, he simply offered companionship. Someone who carried the same echoes of loss, but also the same hunger to honor the past by living fully in the present. One Saturday afternoon, Emily found herself standing at Michael's grave for the first time in years without feeling paralyzed. She carried fresh flowers in her hand, the silver ring gleaming in the sun. For so long, she had avoided coming because she could not face the silence. But now she stood tall, her voice steady as she spoke aloud. "Michael," she whispered, brushing the headstone gently, "you kept your promise. You came back to me not in the way I dreamed, but in the way I needed most. Through Ryan, through your love, through every memory you left behind. I'll carry you with me, always. But now I think it's time I start living again, for both of us." The breeze stirred the leaves around her, and for a moment, she felt as though he was listening. The heaviness in her chest eased, replaced by a quiet peace. That evening, she returned home, placed the flowers he once gave her picture beside her bed, and for the first time in years, she slept without tears. Months later, at a school assembly for Veterans Day, Emily stood before the students with Ryan by her side. She spoke not just of sacrifice, but of love that endured beyond distance, beyond time, beyond even death. As she spoke, she saw her students' faces shine with admiration and understanding. And in their eyes, she saw Michael's legacy. Living on, when the applause came, Emily smiled through her tears. The silver ring still rested on her finger, not as a shackle of grief, but as a beacon of love. Proof of a promise that had never truly been broken, and though her heart would always carry Michael, it now beat with something new: the courage to keep living, to keep teaching, and to keep loving without fear.